So how do I evaluate for anxiety disorder and how to treat? So, the first thing we do is differentiate between like the healthy anxiety and the clinical anxiety, because the last thing we want to do is treat healthy anxiety.
Yeah.
Let's do a case example, for instance, right? John Smith shows up to me. His therapist sent him up. He's been diagnosed with like generalized anxiety disorder with obsessive compulsive features.
Okay.
So what is generalized anxiety disorder?
That was my question.
Yeah. So basically, I'm worrying about most things most of the time. And not only am I spending a lot of significant time worrying, it's having a negative impact on me physically, usually. Now, what are some of these physical symptoms of anxiety? People can be fatigued. People can have panic attacks. People can get headaches. People can get migraines. People can have gastrointestinal issues, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. Often it can be a symptom of some sort of anxiety disorder. So people come in, the first thing we do is make sure that they actually have a clinical anxiety disorder. Now, John Smith, for instance, comes in. Doc, I'm worrying about most of the things most of the time, right? I locked my car. Have I paid that bill? Are things going right in my relationship? Am I saving enough money? Whatever, right? They're worrying about most things most of the time, and they will get obsessive. In this case, they'll get obsessive about it.
They're spending too much time worrying about it, forsaking their normal lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I often ask them is, what percentage of the time when you're not actively distracted or actively engaged in a task, what percentage of that time is spent worrying, right?
Oh, how many people nowadays even have, so you're talking about how much time do you spend worrying when you're not distracted or like actively doing something?
Yeah.
AKA most people never have that time anyways, because we're always looking at our smartphones, distracting ourselves somehow, right?
Exactly.
So how do you even, I mean, are these people, does anyone even ever get a chance to answer that question honestly?
Yeah, well,
or accurately?
It's funny you say that, because when I ask them that question, the answer is usually, well, doc, I don't have any of that time.
Yeah.
And more concerning is, doc, I'm avoiding that time. Some people are actively avoiding having time to think. Now, I tell them one of our goals is the time that you have just alone with your own thoughts is some of your most productive and favorite time. That time to really kind of check in with yourself, to think creatively, to consult with yourself. But I would say like over 90% of the patients that I ask this question, one, doc, I don't even have time to think to myself. And two, I actually like don't want that time. I'm actively avoiding it, which is a bit of a red flag for me.
I don't find that surprising at all.
No.
In the least.
I mean, people are literally putting their phone on when they're in the shower, listening to music. They're just listening to something while they're washing the dishes, driving in their car. Now, here's kind of how I divvy it up. If somebody tells me, hey, doc, when I'm engaged in my task, when I'm distracted, when I'm engaging professionally, socially, whatever, I'm usually feeling pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I don't have some sort of task, I'm worrying most of the time. If I'm like doing my like work at home or I'm at the office and this worry is precluding me from maintaining focus and concentration on the task at hand, now we have an intrusive level of anxiety. That we're going to get to a bit later. That's going to usually require a different type of medication. So,
wow.
Let's say like the most benign. Hey, doc, I'm doing pretty fine when I'm like working and engaged in a task, but on my off time, I'm like constantly worrying. Here we utilize a certain medication perhaps that's not as strong as an SSRI, like a buspirone, for instance. That is for the people that are worrying a lot. It's not intrusive. They're utilizing their mindfulness. They're in therapy, but still, hey, doc, I'm having a lot of worries. I'm not getting to sleep at night. I usually have like a delay in my sleep. Okay, we might not be as the symptoms might not be as severe to warrant an SSRI, like a full-blown antidepressant, but in these kind of the most mild cases of generalized anxiety, in the way I'm describing it, not intrusive, maybe we'll start with the buspirone. If someone comes in and they're functionally being very negatively impacted by their anxiety, let's say they're having intrusive anxiety, let's say they're getting obsessive, let's say that obsessive anxiety is driving their behavior, Let's say they're having a big time delay in their sleep onset. Let's say they're getting fatigued. Hey, doc, I'm having headaches. Now, if you're having like a true clinical anxiety disorder that is not this sort of more mild version that we would treat with a medication like buspirone, here we introduce the SSRI medications, your Prozacs, your Lexapros, your Zoloft. Common question I get from patients is dosing. Hey, doc, I'm on Prozac 20. What does that mean? Hey, doc, my Lexapro's at 15. Why is my neighbor's at 20? So the spiel I usually give is, there's a ton of evidence and data about this. The doses of SSRIs needed to treat mood disorders, dysthymic disorder, which we covered in the first podcast.
Dysthymic, for people who haven't listened to the previous podcast yet, is a prolonged state of low-grade depression.
Bingo. All right, Jeff, you're paying attention.
I was paying attention. I was doing my best,
Very good. So we have dysthymic disorders, like Jeff said, some symptoms of depression, extended period of time, not so functionally disabling, but definitely taken off from like the quality of your life. And then you have your clinical major depression, constellation of symptoms, functionally disabling. Depressive disorders, you need a lower dose of an SSRI to put those symptoms into remission than your anxiety disorders.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Your low-grade depression, your major depression, low, medium doses. Your generalized anxiety disorder with panic, medium doses. And the extreme end of the anxiety spectrum, your obsessive compulsive disorder, different eating disorders, those require high doses of SSRIs for a longer period of time. So you can tell a lot, assuming they're being competently treated by a psychiatrist, just looking at what medication regimen they're on and at what doses, you can already kind of guess what illness they're being treated